Reenactment redirects here. For the 1968 Romanian film, see the Reenactment. Historical reenactment is an educational or entertainment activity in which people follow a plan to recreate aspects of a historical event or period. This may be as narrow as a specific moment from a battle, such as the reenactment of Pickett's charge presented during the Great Reunion of 1913, or as broad as an entire period, such as Regency reenactment or the 1920s Berlin Project. History. Activities related to reenactment have a long history. The Romans staged recreations of famous battles within their amphitheaters as a form of public spectacle. In the Middle Ages, tournaments often reenacted historical themes from ancient Rome or elsewhere. Military displays and mock battles and reenactments first became popular in 17th-century England. In 1638, a staged battle between Christian and Muslim forces was enacted in London, and the Roundheads, flush from a series of victories during the Civil War, reenacted a recent battle at Blackheath in 1645, despite the ongoing conflict. It was in the 19th century that historical reenactments became widespread, reflecting the then intense romantic interest in the Middle Ages. Medieval culture was widely admired as an antidote to the modern Enlightenment and Industrial Age. Plays and theatrical works perpetuated the romanticism of knights, castles, feasts and tournaments. The Duke of Buckingham staged naval battles from the Napoleonic War on the large lake on his estate in 1821, and a reenactment of the Battle of Waterloo was put on for a public viewing at Arsley's Amphitheatre in 1824. Historical reenactment came of age with the grand spectacle of the Eglinton Tournament of 1839, a reenactment of a medieval joust and revel held in Scotland, and organised by Archibald Montgomery, 13th Earl of Eglinton. The tournament was a deliberate act of romanticism, and drew 100,000 spectators. It was held on a meadow at a loop in the Lugton Water. The ground chosen for the tournament was low, almost marshy, with grassy slopes rising on all sides. Lord Eglinton announced that the public would be welcome. He requested medieval fancy dress, if possible, and tickets were free. The pageant itself featured 13 medieval knights on horseback. The preparations, and the many works of art commissioned for or inspired by the Eglinton tournament, had an effect on public feeling in the course of 19th-century Gothic revivalism. Its ambition carried over to events such as a similar lavish tournament in Brussels in 1905, and presaged the historical reenactments of the present. Features of the tournament were actually inspired by Walter Scott's novel Ivanhoe. It was attempting to be a living reenactment of the literary romances. In Eglinton unregistered trademark S own words I am aware of the manifold deficiencies in its exhibition more perhaps than those who were not so deeply interested in it. I am aware that it was a very humble imitation of the scenes which my imagination had portrayed, but I have, at least, done something towards the revival of chivalry. Reenactments of battles became more commonplace in the late 19th century, both in Britain, and also in America. Within a year of the Battle of the Little Bighorn, survivors of U.S. 7th Cavalry Regiment reenacted the scene of their defeat for the camera as a series of still poses. In 1895, members of the Gloucestershire Engineer Volunteers reenacted their famous stand at Rorke's Drift, 18 years earlier. 25 British soldiers beat back the attack of 75 Zulus at the Grand Military Fete at the Cheltenham Winter Gardens. Veterans of the American Civil War recreated battles as a way to remember their fallen comrades and to teach others what the war was all about. The Great Reunion of 1913, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg, was attended by more than 50,000 Union and Confederate veterans, and included reenactments of elements of the battle, including Pickett's charge. During the early 20th century, historical reenactment became very popular in Russia with reenactments of the Siege of Sevastopol, the Battle of Borodino and St. Petersburg and the taking of Atzev in Voronezh in 1918. In 1920, there was a reenactment of the 1917 storming of the Winter Palace on the third anniversary of the event. This reenactment inspired the scenes in Sergei Eisenstein's film October, 10 Days That Shook the World. Large-scale reenactments began to be regularly held at the Royal Tournament, Aldershot II in the 1920s and 30s, A spectacular recreation of the Siege of Namur, an important military engagement of the 9 Years' War, was staged in 1934 as part of a 6-day-long show. In America, modern reenacting is thought to have begun during the 1961–1965 Civil War centennial commemorations. Reenacting grew in popularity during the 1980s and 1990s, due in large part to the success of the 125th anniversary reenactment near the original Manassas battlefield, which was attended by more than 6,000 reenactors. Reenactors. Most participants are amateurs who pursue history as a hobby. Participants within this hobby are extremely diverse. The ages of participants range from young children whose parents bring them along to events, to the elderly. Among adult participants, people from all different walks of life can be found: college students, firefighters, lawyers, members of the armed forces, doctors, and even professional historians. Reenactment groups. Reasons given for participating vary. Some participants are interested in getting a historical perspective on a particular period or war, particularly if they can trace their ancestry back to an individual or individuals who were involved. Others participate for the escapism that such events offer. Categories of reenactors. Reenactors are commonly divided into several broadly defined categories, based on the level of concern for authenticity. Fubs. Some, called fubs, or polyester soldiers, are reenactors who spend relatively little of their time or money maintaining authenticity with regard to uniforms, accessories, or even period behavior. Anachronistic clothing, fabrics, fasteners, snoods, footwear, vehicles, and modern cigarettes are common issues. The origin of the word fub is unknown, though it appears to date to early American Civil War centennial reenactments in 1960 or 1961. Some think that the word derives from a truncated version of far be it from authentic. An alternative definition is far be it for me to question, criticize, or fast and researchless buying. A humorous definition of fub is FARB, forget about research, baby. Some early reenactors assert the word derives from German Farbe, color, because inauthentic reenactors were over-colorful compared with the dull blues, grays or browns of the real Civil War uniforms that were the principal concern of American reenactors at the time the word was coined. According to Burton K. Cumrow, a member of the Black Hats, CSA reenactment group in the early 1960s, he first heard it used as a form of fake German to describe a fellow reenactor. The term was picked up by George Gorman of the 2nd North Carolina at the Centennial Manassas reenactment in 1961, and has been used by reenactors since. Mainstream reenactors make an effort to appear authentic, but may come out of character in the absence of an audience. Visible stitches are likely to be sewn in a period-correct manner, but hidden stitches and undergarments may not be period-appropriate. Food consumed before an audience is likely to be generally appropriate to the period, but it may not be seasonally and locally appropriate. Modern items are sometimes used after hours, or in a hidden fashion. The common attitude is to put on a good show, but that accuracy need only go as far as others can see. Progressive, at the other extreme from fubs are hardcore authentics, or progressives, as they sometimes prefer to be called. Sometimes derisively called stitch counters, hardcore reenactors are sometimes misunderstood by observers. Hardcore reenactors generally value thorough research, and sometimes deride mainstream reenactors for perpetuating inaccurate reenactorisms. They generally seek an immersive reenacting experience, trying to live, as much as possible, as someone of the period might have done. This includes eating seasonally and regionally appropriate food, sewing inside seams and undergarments in a period-appropriate manner, and staying in character throughout an event. The desire for an immersive experience often leads hardcore reenactors to smaller events, or to setting up separate camps at larger events. Period. The period of an event is the range of dates. See authenticity for a discussion of how the period affects the types of costume, weapons, and armor used. Popular periods to reenact include classical reenactment, medieval reenactment, Renaissance reenactment, modern reenactment, Regency reenactment, The fur trade is reenacted at events called as rendezvous. American Civil War reenactment, World War I reenactment, World War II reenactment, Korean War reenactment. Clothing and equipment. Numerous cottage industries abound that provide not only the materials but even the finished product for use by reenactors. Uniforms and clothing made of hand-woven, natural-dyed materials are sewn by hand or machine using the sartorial techniques of the period portrayed. Detailed attention to authenticity in design and construction is given equally as well to headgear, footwear, eyewear, camp gear, accoutrements, military equipment, weapons and so on. These items offer the wearer a lifelike experience in the use of materials, tailoring and manufacturing techniques that are as close to authentic as possible. Event spectators may derive more satisfaction from attending reenactments when a high level of authenticity is attained in both individual clothing and equipment, as well as equipment used in camp. Types. Living history equals. The term living history describes the performance of bringing history to life for the general public in a manner that in most cases is not following a planned script. Historical presentation includes a continuum from well-researched attempts to recreate a known historical event for educational purposes, through representations with theatrical elements, to competitive events for purposes of entertainment. The line between amateur and professional presentations at living history museums can be blurred. While the latter routinely use museum professionals and trained interpreters to help convey the story of history to the public, some museums and historic sites employ living history groups with high standards of authenticity for the same role at special events. Living histories are usually meant for education of the public. Such events do not necessarily have a mock battle but instead are aimed at portraying the life, and more importantly the lifestyle, of people of the period. This often includes both military and civilian impressions. Occasionally, storytelling or acting sketches take place to involve or explain the everyday life or military activity to the viewing public. More common are craft and cooking demonstrations, song and leisure activities, and lectures. Combat training or duels can also be encountered even when larger combat demonstrations are not present. In the United States, the National Park Service Land NPS policy does not allow for battle reenactments on NPS property. There are exceptions, that is Sailors Creek, Gettysburg. These are highly controlled with exacting safety factors, as well as exacting historical truths. In Germany, medieval reenactment is usually associated with living history and Renaissance fairs and festivals, as for example the Peter and Paul Festival in Breton or the Schloss Quartenberg Knights Tournament. The majority of combat reenactment groups are battlefield reenactment groups, some of which have become isolated to some degree because of a strong focus on authenticity. The specific German approach of authenticity is less about replaying a certain event, but to allow an immersion in a certain era, to catch, in the sense of Walter Benjamin, the spiritual message expressed in every monument's and every site's own trace, and aura, even in the age of mechanical reproduction. Historic city festivals and events are quite important to build up local communities and contribute to the self-image of municipalities. Events in monuments or on historical sites are less about the events related to them but serve as staffage for the immersion experience. In Denmark, several open-air museums uses living history as a part of their concept. These includes Middelaldercentret, the Old Town, Aarhus and Freilandsmuseet. Combat demonstration combat demonstrations are mock battles put on by reenacting organizations and or private parties primarily to show the public what combat in the period might have been like. Combat demonstrations are only loosely based on actual battles, if at all, and may simply consist of demonstrations of basic tactics and maneuvering techniques. Battle reenactment scripted battles are reenactments in the strictest sense. The battles are planned out beforehand so that the companies and regiments make the same actions that were taken in the original battles. They are often fought at or near the original battleground or at a place very similar to the original. These demonstrations vary widely in size from a few hundred fighters to several thousand, as do the arenas used. Tactical combat Tactical battles are generally not open to the public. Tactical battles are fought like real battles with both sides coming up with strategies and tactics to beat their opponents. With no script, a basic set of agreed-upon rules, and on-site judges, tactical battles can be considered a form of live-action role-playing game, but, in the cases where firearms are used, with real weapons firing blank ammunition. The development of historical airsoft tournaments is an offshoot of the military reenactment tactical. Commercial reenactment. Many castles, museums, and other historical tourist attractions employ actors or professional reenactors as part of the experience. These usually address the recreation of a specific town, village, or activity within a certain time frame. Commercial reenactment shows are usually choreographed and follow a script. Some locations have set up permanent authentic displays. By their nature, these are usually living history presentations, rather than tactical or battle reenactment, although some host larger temporary events. Publications. Many publications have covered historical reenactment and living history. Prominent among these are the Camp Chase Gazette, Smoke and Fire News, and two different magazines named Living History, and Skirmish Magazine. The Medieval Soldier by Jerry Embleton and John Howe is a popular book on the topic, which has been translated into French and German. It was followed by Medieval Military Costume in Color Photographs. For the Napoleonic period, two books of interest cover life in the military at that time and living history, The Napoleonic Soldier by Stephen E. Morn, 1999 and Marching with Sharpe by B.J. Bluth, 2001. Various Napoleonic reenactment groups cover the history of their associated regiments as well as try to describe and illustrate how they approach recreating the period. The goal to be as authentic as is possible has led many serious reenactment societies to set up their own research groups to verify their knowledge of the uniforms, drill and all aspects of the life that they strive to portray. In this way reenactment plays a vital role in bringing history to life, keeping history alive, and in expanding the knowledge and understanding of the period. In the UK a number of small publishing houses have been established that particularly publish books about the English Civil War and more recently, of earlier periods as well. The largest are Stuart Press, around 250 volumes in print, and Partisan Press. Little has been published about reenactment in the mainstream market, except for press articles. One exception is the book I Believe in Yesterday, My Adventures in Living History by Tim Moore, which recounts his experiences trying out different periods of reenactment and the people he meets and things he learns whilst doing so. Media support. Motion picture and television producers often turn to reenactment groups for support. Films like Gettysburg, Glory, The Patriot, and Alatriste benefited greatly from the input of reenactors, who arrived on set fully equipped and steeped in knowledge of military procedures, camp life, and tactics. In a documentary about the making of the film Gettysburg, actor Sam Elliott, who portrayed Union General John Bedford in the film, said of reenactors, "I think we're really fortunate to have those people involved. In fact, they couldn't be making this picture without them. There's no question about that. These guys come with their wardrobe, they come with their weaponry. They come with all the accoutrements, but they also come with the stuff in their head and the stuff in their heart." Criticism. Critics question the motivation of reenactors. Some suggest concerns about the level of immersion found in some areas, notably those involving 20th-century conflicts where combatants had stricter regulations regarding personal grooming. The average age of reenactors is generally far higher than the average age of soldiers in most conflicts. Few reenactment units discriminate based on age and physical condition. Some critics have complained about the exclusion of women from American Civil War combat reenactment units. While a small handful of women may have fought in the conflict, almost all did so disguised as men. Attitudes on this topic seem to vary widely. Thompson's book discusses the fantasy fob, or tendency of reenactors to gravitate towards elite units such as commandos, paratroopers, or Waffen-SS units. This results in underrepresentation in the reenactment community of what were the most common types of military troops in the period being reenacted. The question has arisen among North American reenactors, but similar issues exist in Europe. For example, in Britain, a high proportion of Napoleonic War reenactors perform as members of the 95th Rifles, and medieval groups have an overproportion of plate-armored soldiers. The UK has multi-period events such as History in Action, where groups can see each other's appearance and performances, as well as perform for the general public. Weapons can be a concern in countries where weapons of most forms are legally banned or socially frowned on. Reenactors' interactions with the public, and educational work of volunteer groups like NARES, help mitigate such issues. A final concern is that reenactors may be accused of being, or actually be, aligned with the political beliefs that some of the reenacted armies fought for, such as Nazism or the Confederate South. For example, U.S. politician Rich Iacoc's participation in a World War II reenactment in which he was in the group that portrayed the German 5th SS Panzer Division Viking side excited media criticism during his 2010 congressional campaign. See also, List of historical reenactment groups, Commemoration of the American Civil War reenactments, Cosplay, Live-action role-playing game, Living History. References. Further reading, Auld, Randall. Catharsis, Revision, and Reenactment, Negotiating the Meaning of the American Civil War. Journal of American Culture 19, 1 doi, 10.1111 per Joule 1542-734 x 1996.19041 x. Chronis, Athinodoros. Co-constructing Heritage at the Gettysburg Stryscape. Annals of Tourism Research 32, 386 406 doi, 10.1016/J Annals. 2004.07.009. Chronis, Athinodoros. Co-constructing the Narrative Experience, Staging and Consuming the American Civil War at Gettysburg. Journal of Marketing Management 24, 5 27 doi, 10.1362/026725708 x 273894. Decker, Stephanie K. Being Period, An Examination of Bridging Discourse in a Historical Reenactment Group. Journal of Contemporary Ethnography 39, 273 296 doi, 10.177/0891241609341541. Gaps, Stephen. Mobile Monuments, A View of Historical Reenactment and Authenticity from Inside the Costume Cupboard of History. Rethinking History 13, 395 409 doi, 10.1080/136425209030911159. Haddon, Robert Lee. Reliving the Civil War, A Reenactor's Handbook. Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, Stackpole Books. Hall, Dennis. Civil War Reenactors in the Postmodern Sense of History. Journal of American Culture 17, 7 11 doi, 10.1111 per Joule 1542-734 x 1994.00007 x. Heiser, John. The Great Reunion of 1913 inches. National Park Service. Retrieved August 15, 2008. Horwitz, Tony. Confederates in the Attic, Dispatches from the Unfinished Civil War, An Ethnographic Study of Reenactors and Groups Engaged in Remembrance. Scow, John. Al Bang, Bang. Your History, Buddy. Time. Pages 58. Stanton, Kathy. Reenactors in the Parks, A Study of External Revolutionary War Reenactment Activity at National Parks. National Park Service. Retrieved on July 28, 2008. Strauss, Mitchell. A Framework for Assessing Military Dress Authenticity in Civil War Reenacting. Clothing and Textiles Research Journal 19, 145 157 doi, 10.1177/08873002 x 01019004001. Retrieved December 31, 2008. Teitelman, Emma. Knights and Their Ladies Fair Reenacting the Civil War. Bachelor's Thesis, Wesleyan University. External links: the historical Reenactment website, information relating to reenactment globally and the home of the historical Reenactment Wiki, UK-based historical event organisers, their website featuring a brief history of reenactment, primarily but not exclusively from a UK and European perspective. Reenactor.net, the worldwide online home of reenacting.